குட் மார்னிங். அனைவர்களுக்கும் எங்களுடைய காலை வணக்கங்கள். ஸ்ரீ அன்னை பகவான் ஸ்ரீ அரவிந்தர் அப்பா தவத்திரு கர்மயோகி அவர்களின் பாதாரவிந்தங்களில் பணிந்து இன்றைய வெப் மீட்டிங் நிகழ்ச்சியை துவங்குகிறோம். இன்று கேரி சார் அவர்கள் 4th சாப்டர் யோகா ஆஃப் தி கிங் என்ற தலைப்பில் பேச இருக்கிறார்கள். Now I am inviting Mr. Garry to deliver this speech.
Good morning. Actually, it's the 4th lecture, but it's not the 4th chapter. I see this is, maybe somebody corrected it or I have made the mistake. It's the 3rd canto. 3rd canto, 4th lecture. So no, it's first the introduction and then we did Canto 1 first half, and then issue, and this is the 4th talk, but it's the 3rd canto. It's a very special experience to prepare for this canto. Though I have read it so many years ago, it has really come to life, and I hope that that can be communicated. In the last talk, Sri Aurobindo introduces us to Savitri. And we don't know anything about her birth or her origin. We only know her at the height of her life when she's to meet the greatest challenge a human being has ever met. And at the end of the canto, he tells us this is the day when Satyavan must die. She's the Divine Mother. She's the incarnation of the Divine Mother. She's an avatar. Now, in Canto 3, he introduces us to Aswapati. He starts by saying, a world's desire compelled her mortal birth. Her mortal birth is Savitri's mortal birth. The world's desire is the aspiration of humanity for a release from ignorance, darkness, suffering, falsehood, evil, for a divine life. That's what we will learn. But this canto is about Aswapati, who is the embodiment of the world's desire. We'll find out later. At this time, we don't know. But we're going to find out in the 5th canto of Book 1 that Aswapati has gone in his aspiration, had a vision of the Divine Mother in the highest possible spiritual experience, and called on her. She has offered him an ultimate boon, and he said, the only boon I want is a boon for the earth. I want you to come down and take birth. So he is the embodiment of the world's desire, which we can say the aspiration not of humanity, because we're not conscious of a divine life, or I don't think most of us are waking up in the morning thinking about a divine life. The world. He doesn't mean just the people. He means the world has a deep desire for a divine life, and he's going to discover that. Aswapati is going to discover that in his own spiritual experience. He's going to discover that in his own spiritual experience, and he's going to embody that world's desire. Now we're introduced to Aswapati. He says, one in the forefront of the immemorial quest. I want to just explain about the notes. The red text is the lines from Savitri. Black is my comments. I've done this in such a way that anybody later on who would like to go through the canto and get the main ideas not only gets the key lines, but also gets some explanation of the lines. So I hope it'll be helpful later on. I have not taken all the lines. I've taken key lines that I think are important to follow the path of thought through the canto. He says, he describes Aswapati as one in the forefront of the immemorial quest. What is that immemorial quest? He has told us in the first paragraph of Life Divine, in the human aspiration, the quest of humanity from the ancient times for God, light, freedom, immortality. That's the immemorial quest. He is one in the forefront of that quest, and we're going to learn about him. He says, what is that quest? It's not humanity's quest. He describes it as the quest in which the unknown pursues himself through form. Spiritual tradition has always told us about man seeking something. But Sri Aurobindo is telling us it is the divine that is seeking something. And this is the knowledge that Aswapati is going to discover through his experiences. And he is an embodiment not of the human aspiration. He's an embodiment of the divine's aspiration for fulfilling its intention in the universe. And he's going to discover in this canto and the next two cantos, he's going to discover what the divine intention in the universe is. And I think it's very important to remember, as far as we know, nobody has ever known the divine intention in the universe until Sri Aurobindo. At least nobody has proclaimed it, we can say. No religion has ever proclaimed that I know of, certainly none of the major religions, that the purpose of the existence of the world is for a divine life. Religion says, the Christianity says you go to heaven and enjoy heaven individually. It doesn't say what God's purpose is. Who has a purpose? We are here in the suffering and darkness. We should go to heaven and enjoy bliss. A Buddha says the whole world is a wheel of suffering. The only thing you can do is get out of it. It has nothing to do with God. The world has nothing to do with God. Shankara says even more than that, the world is an illusion. How can it have a purpose and how can it have a mission? Nobody has said before, given the secret that the world has been created by the divine to manifest itself. And this is the knowledge he's going to discover. And maybe, very likely, but we can't say anything for sure, maybe Sri Aurobindo's the first who ever has discovered this. Certainly he's the first to proclaim it to humanity, as far as we know. And when I read this about Aswapati, I keep thinking that what Sri Aurobindo is writing about Aswapati's experiences and discoveries is really his own personal diary. And there is no literature in the world, in the history of humanity, that has described what he describes as Aswapati's experience, his spiritual adventures in Savitri. I think it's not a rare privilege. It's an unbelievable gift he has given to us, to humanity, to understand what the Spirit is, what the spiritual adventure is, what the purpose of it is, and what is there waiting for us. And I take this as a personal diary of Sri Aurobindo. Friday night at 10 o'clock, I made the final adjustments on this presentation. I went to bed by 11, and about 1 and 2 in the morning, I got up to go to the toilet, and I have to pass where Appa is sitting or sleeping, and he was awake. And he found me a little awake, and he started to talk. And for 1 hour in the middle of the night, he was talking. It's unusual. It's happened before, but normally he doesn't disturb me when I'm in the middle of the night, but I was very fresh, so I sat down and started listening to him. After an hour, I went back to bed. When I lay down and put my head on the pillow, suddenly I thought of Aswapati. The thing I had missed about it, I've been thinking for a long time, and I have mentioned to Appa that Aswapati is really Sri Aurobindo's experience. The experiences of Savitri, which we will read later in Book 8, till the end, are really Mother's experiences, is my understanding, and it's a different experience. Mother goes to the psychic, and from there, Aswapati's experience is different, and it's in Life Divine. Sri Aurobindo explains there's more than one path. Ultimately, you have to cover the whole thing, but her path is very much seems to be what Savitri went through. His path, according to what we know about his spiritual experience, seems to be described by Aswapati. That I had thought before and mentioned to Appa many times, though I have no way to prove it or confirm it unless he tells us what he had in mind or Mother does. But something struck me. In this poem, Aswapati, at least in the poem, Aswapati never speaks to anybody about his spiritual experience. He doesn't write a book. He doesn't get disciples around him. He doesn't found a religion. He doesn't go out and proclaim to the world. He pursues a spiritual quest on behalf of humanity and asks the Divine Mother for the boon to bring a divine life on earth. Mother has frequently said Sri Aurobindo never wanted to write a book. He never would have written Life Divine or the other or Synthesis, except it's Mother who started Arya and asked him to write. Sri Aurobindo never would have started an ashram. He didn't want to start an ashram. He didn't want to have devotees or sadhaks. He didn't want to start a religion, certainly. It suddenly struck me in the middle of the night when I lay down, this is exactly Sri Aurobindo's personality described by Aswapati. He's not thinking of humanity, he's thinking of the divine. He's not trying to get followers or disciples or anything. He's trying to do the divine will. So I got up after 5 minutes lying in bed thinking about this. I got up and went outside. Appa was still awake, and I told him this, and he liked the thought very much. This morning at 5 o'clock, I was in a deep sleep, and the phone rang, and it was Appa. I answered the phone, but there's no voice at the other end. I was concerned, why would Appa call me at 5 in the morning? He doesn't do that unless it's important. I called back, and he doesn't answer the phone. So I was a little concerned. I called Pooja, who sleeps in the next room, and she woke up, and she answered the phone, and she went and said, Appa is writing. So I said, please give him the phone. I said, you called me. He says, I didn't call you. I said, it's your phone has called me. He said, no, I didn't call you, but I am writing an article about what you told me the night before, and thinking very much about you and feeling the inspiration of this thought. And when he's writing it, the call comes. So maybe there's a truth in what I'm saying. So, one in the front of the immemorial quest, in which the unknown pursues himself. The divine is pursuing himself through form. The divine is seeking a manifestation in form, and he comes back and explains this later. Brought down to earth's dumb need her radiant power. Her radiant power is Savitri. He has just told us that Savitri has come, and it is Aswapati who has brought down to earth the radiant power of Savitri, who's the Divine Mother. And that's going to become clear to us in 2 cantos later when he meets the Divine Mother and calls her down. But he's telling us now. So the radiant power is the Divine Mother as Savitri, who's the divine word, the daughter of the Sun, the goddess of the supreme truth. And then he tells us, he calls Aswapati a colonist from immortality. Aswapati is not a normal aspiring human being who through some great effort or happened to stumble on spiritual experience. He's a colonist from immortality. He's come down here from immortality. His was a spirit that stooped from larger spheres. From heaven, he has come down here from the heavens to descended for a mission. His mission was to bring down the Divine Mother, to bring down Savitri, to save the earth or to transform the earth and to transform life. And he says, his birth held up a symbol and a sign. His human self covered the all-wise. His human form is only a disguise for the divinity that he really represents. He says a greater sonship was his divine right. He's not really a son of earth. He's a son of heaven. So that his birth holds up a symbol and a sign. The symbol is, he's a symbol of humanity's aspiration for God. The sign is a sign of humanity's destiny. It's one thing that we may aspire, it's quite another that we're going to achieve. But the fact that he has come down and the fact that he has brought Savitri down is the confirmation and the sign that this is humanity's destiny. It's inevitable. So now we begin to learn about Aswapati's nature. He has the strength of the original permanence is in him. There's a strength in him that comes from above. There's a power in him from the unknowable. He calls him a treasurer of superhuman dreams. How many of you know that Sri Aurobindo said he had 5 dreams? 5 dreams for humanity, for the world. The freedom of India, the renaissance of Asia, the world government, human unity. I'm going to miss one. Last one is the supramental manifestation on earth. I'm missing one of the 5. I don't know how I could do that. So Sri Aurobindo is a treasure of superhuman dreams. This is not what the human beings are dreaming of. We dream of house and car and marriage and happiness and wealth, and if at all, we dream of personal spiritual fulfillment. He dreams of the supramental transformation of the earth. Aswapati is one with these superhuman dreams. And it's interesting, he has not only the knowledge, but he has the will to achieve. We speak a lot about aspiration. Aspiration is not that I wish I have something, or it would be nice to have something, or I believe it's something. It's to have the knowledge and to have the will. And Aswapati is an embodiment of the aspiration. Whose aspiration? I think it must be the divine's aspiration for the world, not the human aspiration for the world. So now he tells us about Aswapati's spiritual progress. He says his days were a long growth to the Supreme. His growth is to the Supreme. And we may not be experts in spiritual experience and the experiences that humanity can have or that are open to us. But I think it'll be clear in this canto, in the next canto, and in the third canto, that he's talking about spiritual experiences that have never been conceived before. In this canto itself, he describes spiritual experiences that seem to exceed everything that has ever been achieved, even by the greatest of rishis, sages, avatars in the past. And for him, that's only the beginning. He starts the next canto. When you finish this canto, by the time you finish this canto, you feel, what more is there? There can never be anything more than this. In fact, halfway through the canto, I already think the story's over. But he keeps going and keeps discovering and keeps going further. And then when you go to the next canto, you find it's called The Secret Knowledge. My gosh, there's something more? I thought we've already got all the secret knowledge in Canto 3, and he starts the secret knowledge by saying that from a peak, he looks to further peaks. Our earliest seekings, adventures in the unknown, they're only the beginning. I thought this is the culmination of all spiritual experiences there in Canto 3, and in Canto 4 he starts by telling us this is only the beginning. Because for Sri Aurobindo it's only the beginning. And to understand how great is the vision, how great is the realization, but how even greater is the vision of what he is calling for. When Appa says that life divine is the horoscope of the universe, he really means for the universe, and not just for this year or this lifetime, the whole thing. What life divine portrays in prose, he portrays in poetry and personal experience. So he says, his soul lived as eternity's delegate. He's here. He has come to earth. And that's very true of Sri Aurobindo and Mother. They have come to earth, and Aswapati has come to earth as the delegate of eternity to fulfill its mission on earth. He describes him. His mind was like a fire assailing heaven. His will, a hunter in the trails of light. Each action left the footprint of a god. And we know that for any act, if it becomes perfect, it manifests divinity. It manifests spirit. If each action left the footprint of a God, means whatever he did to utter perfection. I think we know to do one act in our life, a fully consecrated, perfect act, it can change our whole life. Can we imagine every act, each act, having the divine manifesting the Spirit? This is what he's talking about. He says, Earth, our life, became a playground of the living infinite. Aswapati, his life, his work became an expression of the living infinite, inconceivable things. And now he begins to tell us what are Aswapati's experiences. And we'll try to go through, it's a long canto, I try to go through the steps in his spiritual experience as they're described in this canto. First, he tells us, because remember, for the first reader of this, the reader may not know anything about spirit or anything about, let alone Aswapati or Savitri or life divine or anything. He must start at the beginning. And what does he do? He says, the form deceives, the person is a mask. Hidden deep in man, celestial powers can dwell. So Aswapati's discovering this. He's discovering that the form that we see on the outside, even the person that we think we are or that we see, is only a mask. Deep inside, there are celestial powers. And that's what Aswapati's discovering. And I won't go through them, but I just gave a few examples here. There's one that a story Appa has referred to many times. Around 1960, there's a very famous magazine in America in the 60s and 70s called Life magazine. It was the first big full-color magazine that was published. And they once published an article. The editor of the magazine, very famous man, he died on the operating table. He was pronounced dead on the operating table in a New York hospital. And after some 5 or 10 minutes, he came back to life. And they published an article telling the story of his experience. If he wasn't the editor, they would have never published because nobody will believe. But it's his journal, so he said, I have to tell this story. And he describes being on the operating table, feeling his whole body dying, and the death coming up from the bottom of his feet and life leaving him. And when it reached the heart and is just stopping the heart, because the doctor said his heart stopped beating, otherwise he wouldn't have been proclaimed dead. Something in him, a will rose in him and said, no, I'm not going. And he reversed the process. He's not a yogi, not a saint, may not even believe in God. But he said, no, I'm not going. He reversed the process. And to the doctors, when they had given up and were just going to cart him away, suddenly he recovered. That's one glimpse of the divine powers that are there. We think that we are the slave of our body. That which is the inhabitant in us is the master of the body. It is a divine power. Now he tells us there's not only divine powers in us, but there's a divine inhabitant. And in the tradition all the way back to the Upanishads, they talk about a tiny little seed no bigger than the man's thumb, which is the divine in man. He calls it the immortal in our mortal poverty. The divine is not up there. The divine is inside each of us. Our mortal poverty is not because we're down here, it's because we live on the surface. We take our clothes for our reality rather than the spirit which is within us. He said, it's the screened, unrecognized inhabitant. Not in Aswapati, in each of us. There is that screened, unrecognized inhabitant, the immortal in mortals, the dumb seed of our divinity. And it's that which has been implanted. It's that for which the divine has manifested the universe. And it's for the perfection and revelation and evolution of that dumb seed in each of us that this world is there. That's the world's desire. That dumb seed is the world's desire to manifest divinity. It's the inner Purusha, the inner self. So Aswapati has discovered that. In the Vedic tradition, Agni is called the father of the gods. All the gods are born of Agni, the fire. Sri Aurobindo says Agni is the divine will. But he also says that Agni is the first of the gods. Agni is the divine will in man, which is aspiration, which is not the human aspiration. It is the aspiration of the dumb seed in us. The aspiration, the flame of God in us that's trying to be born. And it's that aspiration which calls down all of the celestial powers, all of the divine powers into us in order to manifest itself and evolve and release itself. The Vedic rishis had that knowledge, they had that vision. They may not have understood divine life or supermentality, but they knew that divine seed, and they knew it was the key to everything. Not moksha, not going away. Releasing that divine inhabitant inside and calling the divine powers down. So Aswapati here, at a very early stage in his spiritual experience, he has the Vedic experience. The ultimate Vedic experience of thousands of years ago. And he comes back to it later.
Sir?
Yes, is there a question?
Ashokan. Yes, sir. Ashokan sir has a question. May I read it now?
Yes.
Savitri's father seems to have played a key role in her spiritual work, but neither Bhagavan's parents nor mother's parents seem to have played any role in their spiritual work. What can we understand from this? That is it.
You followed the question. Savitri's father was Aswapati. Sri Aurobindo and mother, there's nothing that we know about their... Are you still connected? It's just okay. There's nothing we know about the parent of Sri Aurobindo and mother that are divine. None of them did yoga, that we know. Sri Aurobindo's father was a doctor who never wanted him to learn Indian culture, and mother's parents were materialists. They didn't believe in any religion. Her father was a banker. Her mother was a strict materialist. So what do we make of that? It's a very good question, Ashok. I never thought of it. I think it's important that what Savitri is not the result of Aswapati's realization. What Aswapati's realization brought down Savitri. Savitri's realization comes from above. And that's true for Sri Aurobindo and Mother. It's no mortal parent who can give birth to an avatar by what they do. That's a grace for them. So what Aswapati represents, supposing Savitri was not born to Aswapati, Aswapati represents the aspiration calling down the Divine Mother. In the poem, Savitri's his daughter. Whether Savitri's his daughter or happens someplace else in the world, that's not central. After all, in a sense, you can say that it's Sri Aurobindo doing his yoga brought mother to him, and it's he who declared her the Divine Mother. It's she who declared him to the world, because left to himself, he would have just kept quiet, doing what he's doing for humanity or for the divine, and nobody would have ever heard of him if it wasn't for Mother, and vice versa. Neither of them were seeking publicity from this. So it's a very interesting question. I will think about it more, but Savitri's realization is because she's an incarnation of the Divine Mother. Savitri coming down and being born at this moment in time as his daughter is because of his aspiration, because this is what he wanted. He didn't want anything for himself. So whether or not Savitri's born as his daughter, or Sri Aurobindo's aspiration for supramental transformation brought down the Divine Mother at the same time and brought her to work with him, I think in that sense the spirit of the thing is the same. This is a story, and so it's written in this way. But it's a very interesting point. Now he tells us about the soul's evolution through time. He says that the soul passes passenger from life to life, from scale to scale. Scale to scale means from different levels of life, from the most primitive life, from the plant life to the animal life to the human life. The soul is on a long journey, and each time changing his imaged self from form to form. The soul is taking on different forms as it evolves in consciousness on a journey. Why? What is that journey for? In the tradition, it's so that we can get liberated. Why did we ever bother going through this long journey from birth to birth to get liberated? The soul is already a part of the divine. It doesn't need liberation. But he says here, in the worm foresees the coming God. The soul has taken birth through all of these forms in time, from life to life and scale to scale and form to form, so that God can manifest in form. We start as the worm, but ultimately we're to manifest God. And that is Sri Aurobindo's message. Not that we go to God, not that we worship God, not that we merge in moksha with the Supreme, but we become a manifestation of God. And so Aswapati has discovered this knowledge of the ultimate purpose of the soul, incarnation, birth, and passage of birth. He has discovered that. All the spiritual traditions tell us what we should do for our own personal spiritual progress. They don't tell us that we're here to manifest the divine. We think we have our own personal agenda. Aswapati discovers the real purpose of the soul's birth, the real purpose of this journey in time. And now it begins his self-discovery. So you see the titles, I'm trying to help you just see the succession of thought without going through all the lines because there's just not enough time. He says, at last the traveler in the paths of time arrives at the frontiers of eternity. So Aswapati, who's gone through these births and forms, he arrives at the frontiers of eternity. Sri Aurobindo says that we have been evolving. All life is yoga. Not just our life, all life on earth is yoga. It's an evolution of consciousness. But man, the human being, is the first species in which we can consciously do the yoga. We can consciously evolve. It's not just through the process of nature, and that's what he means by yoga, a conscious effort of yoga. And consciously we can break out of the limitations of the ignorance we're in, and we can reach the eternity. So this is where Aswapati is. He's a soul who's evolved through so many births, and now he's going to break out from the human to discover the divine as a soul. He says he feels his substance of undying self. He discovers the undying self in him. A beam of the eternal smites his heart. His thought stretches to infinity. All in him turns to spiritual vastnesses. His soul breaks out to join the oversoul. And in Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo says by oversoul, he means the spirit, God, the superconscient. So we're on the first 2 pages of Aswapati's experience, and already he's reaching God and the superconscient. Then it must be over. What more is there? If you say a man has realized God, then and the spirit, that's it, isn't it? This is the beginning. This is the admission into kindergarten for him. His life is oceaned by that super life. He's no longer the small mortal human being living the way in the daily round of things. His life is suddenly opened or gradually opened to the vast life of the universe and what its purpose is. What is its purpose? Its purpose is to manifest the divine, and that's what he's discovering. And he says, he has drunk from the breasts of the mother of the worlds. A topless supernature fills his frame. Who is the mother of the worlds? The mother of the worlds is the supreme Aditi, the supreme divine mother, who is the creator, the Shakti, who's the creative force of the universe. All creation, all universe is the Shakti, is the Ishwara's force of nature's manifestation. He has reached that force, that divine force, and been nurtured by her. He becomes aware not of the life around him, which is nature, the unconscious, ignorant nature. He becomes aware of the supreme spiritual force of the Divine Mother that has created the world and that's evolving through the world. And this is only the beginning for him. He says, immortally, she conceives herself in him. She is the Divine Mother. Him is in the evolving soul, and in Aswapati now. It's the Divine Mother conceiving herself in him, manifesting herself in the human form, through the soul. He's discovered that. In the creature, in the human creature, the unveiled creatrix works. Mother works. In Synthesis of Yoga, especially in the last part on the yoga self-perfection, he explains that the purpose of the yoga is for the human soul to awaken to the Divine Mother, to surrender to her force, and the rest is done by her. We do not become divine. We do not become supramental. It is Mother's force acting in us which transforms us. The human cannot transform himself. So he is the creature in whom the creatrix, the creative force, spiritual force of the universe is working and shaping him. And the whole rest of this canto describes not what he does, but what she does in him to shape the God in the human form, bring out the buried divine in the human form. And then he says, her being is his through a vast identity. It's not that the Divine Mother identifies with us, it's he identifies with her, and his being manifests her, then is revealed in man the overt divine. Overt divine, no longer hidden. The divine out, expressed. So he has surrendered to her. She has worked in him to reveal, not just to him, but through him, the divinity in man. So a static oneness and dynamic power descend into him, the integral Godhead's seals. Why does he say that? This is not a Godhead. If this is just a static oneness, if all he does is discover nirvana or the bliss of oneness, then it's the traditional path. He also describes the dynamic power of the divine, because his yoga and the yoga of the divine is transformation of the human into the divine, manifestation of a divine life. It's not enough we get oneness or peace. We must also get the power. So that's why the Divine Mother is so important. That's why this is a yoga of surrender to the Divine Mother. We need the power to transform life, her power. So that's the integral Godhead. In the tradition, God is peace. God is knowledge. God is silence or something. The integral Godhead is combining Ishvara and Shakti, combining the knowledge and peace and silence and infinity with the power of manifestation. So already he's beginning to show this, and we've hardly begun his adventure. Hardly at the beginning. He identifies with the Divine Mother. Then he tells us the soul's long preparation for the discovery of God. It's a long path over births and births and births and births. We got it in a few pages as an essence. He climbs to a peak. He's climbing. Aswapati climbs to a peak that no feet have ever trod. I take it, and it comes later, that he is already reaching a spiritual realization that no human has ever reached. And he's only at the beginning. We've hardly heard about his experiences yet. And then he talks about an endless spiral of ascent and fall. This is an important idea which we discussed in Canto 1, that the symbol dawn is the awakening aspiration from deep in the earth and the response of the heavens, the dawn coming in response to that. There's the ascending aspiration, there's the descending grace. And this is a theme through everything Sri Aurobindo writes, and he says this is the whole process of the universe, an endless spiral of ascent and fall. So what he describes in this canto is Aswapati constantly rises to higher levels of spiritual experience, and then he comes back into the human consciousness after each one. And he'll explain later, we cannot sustain on that high level. We go and have an experience, and then we come back. But when we come back, we're not the same. Something of that higher experience comes back down into us. And through this constant effort of ascent and descent, through rising and then falling back, something is being transformed. He says, through which his glory shines, for whom we are made. We reach a point where even in the human form, something of the divine begins to reveal itself. And that's where we are with Aswapati. He has gone where human has not gone before, but brought it back, and it reaches a point where even through the human form, something of the divine glory is shining, and we break into the infinity of God. So he describes the process of Aswapati's nature being spiritualized. You know, for us, it's very important. It's not the soul reaching the oversoul. It's the divine, the spirit spiritualizing our nature, because that's life. That's liberation, but this is transformation. So through this, he's describing the process, of course, very symbolically and very succinctly in Life Divine and Synthesis. He describes it in long chapters, step by step by step, all of this, but he's giving it as an experience. He escapes into supernature's arc of living light. He's not escaped into nirvana or a blank emptiness. Supernature is the divine mother's force that creates the universe, the living light above that is manifesting itself, that has come to work on earth. And it says it built his soul into a statued God. The work of that force, of that supernature, is to make his human soul a figure of the divine soul. And then he says, a seer is born. So Aswapati, through this process, has become a seer. And he's going to explain to us in great detail, what does it mean? What does he mean by seer? What does the seer see? What is the power that he has acquired? And this canto is really about the canto of Aswapati, the seer. We have the yogi, the seer, the sage, the saint. There are so many. And what does he see? He's going to reveal to us in this canto. He calls him a shining guest of time. Who can be a guest of time? Only somebody whose real home is not in time, is in eternity. That's why he called him a colonist of immortality. He comes from immortality. Not only that, but he's going to start living. He's going to rise and live in the eternity and be here as a guest, where his home is there, where the foundation of his consciousness is in eternity, but he's acting and living in the world at the same time. He'll be a shining guest of time. He says, for him, mind is our limit that keeps us human. Mind is our highest level of consciousness as in the human consciousness, but it creates a block, a wall, a veil, a shell, a lid that prevents us from having the spiritual experience and prevents the spirit from coming down. So for him, mind's limiting firmament is the sky, its limited top, lid, is ceased. It no longer, when I try to think of the divine, I reach the lid of my mind and it's hard to go further. I see a reflection of my human thoughts and everything. Hard to get beyond that. For him, there's no lid. He sees beyond. It's open. He says the conscious ends of being went rolling back. So very interesting. What is the conscious ends of being? Well, the conscious end of the normal human being is I'm physical at one level, I'm vital, and I'm mental. And between these three is the ends of being. Below what's there in the subconscious and the inconscient, I don't know. It's unconscious. Above what's there in the superconscious, I don't know. For him, the conscious ends of being went rolling back. For the yogi aspiring, for the sannyasi aspiring for moksha, one end rolls back. He goes to the superconscious. And he goes to the superconscious by leaving the conscious. He doesn't expand his consciousness. He leaves the body to go up there. But Aswapati's living in the body, living in the heart, living in the mind, and both ends, both ways are expanding. So the superconscious is opening above, and the depths and truths of the subconscious and the inconscient are opening below, and his being is becoming more and more conscious. Sri Aurobindo says that if you have the sannyasi who goes from life to moksha, trades one form of unconsciousness for another. Because when he goes to moksha, he loses consciousness of life. And the whole tradition, the whole idea of Sri Aurobindo is, we must not leave this. We must bring the consciousness here. We must not only bring the light from above and know the light above, we must shine that light and discover the light below. That is the Vedic, both ends we expand. So there's no superconscious and no subconscious for the integral yogi. They both disappear. There's only consciousness. But consciousness of the whole, that's the divine, when everything is known in its totality. Not that we go from here to there. Now, if we're very happy, if in a meditation we can go inside and feel a great peace or bliss or love or something like that, though we've completely forgotten the world and our mind, vital, physical, and then we come back. But Mother says she never went into trance. She never had a spiritual experience in which she lost consciousness of the human consciousness. She rolled back the edges, so her human consciousness expanded more and more until it embraced the divine, until it embraced all of life. It's a different experience. It's not there. It's not what the yogic traditions teach at all. They say you get out of this, forget this, go deep in trance, and you find the divine. And when you find the divine, this is left. Just throw it away. So he says, the conscious ends of being went rolling back. The island ego joined its continent. What is the continent? The continent is the whole manifest universe, is the divine. The whole idea is that to get out of our limitation, not to give up our individuality. For the individual to discover we are really universal, and not only that, but to discover we're transcendent. That our being is that we are the transcendent divine. We are the universal divine. We are the divine in every other human being. And then ultimately, the most difficult of all, to discover that even the divine is in matter. And that is also our being. And he's going to go there later on. So the being is expanding. It's not concentrating. You know, Appa constantly talks about the difference between concentration and consecration. By concentration, you focus on one point, put everything at one point, and lose everything else. Consecration is you offer everything to the divine, so you open and expand. You don't shift from one thing to another. You expand to include everything. You expand to include all other people. You live in other people. Aswapati, he's going to describe that experience. You live in the divine. You don't forget the individual and just become merged with something. You remain the individual, but you remain the divine individual. And it includes everything else. It includes everyone else. It includes the whole universe. the whole universe could take refuge in her single heart. Mother didn't achieve that by concentration. She expanded to the boundaries of the universe and behind. So this is what's happening to him. He says, the finite self mated with infinity. Didn't dissolve. Didn't give up the finite self. It mated, became infinite. This is the beginning of his journey. And then he says, there gleamed the dawn of a spiritual day. Dawn has a very special meaning for us, so wherever I see dawn in the poem, I begin to really concentrate. What is this? He says, his march of progress became an eagle's flight, no longer a march of effort step by step. He's soaring like an eagle into the higher domains. Where does he soar? He soars out of the ignorance, out of apprenticeship to the ignorance. We're not just apprentices of the ignorance. We are devotees of the ignorance. And if anybody tells us to get out, we will defend our ignorance. We are very sincerely devoted to the ignorance. Empire means power. Power to achieve and accomplish, not just to be free from something, but to govern it, to rule it, to master it. And then he says, above mind's twilight and life's star-led night, there gleamed the dawn of a spiritual day. Remember when we were talking about the symbol dawn, I said all this time I thought dawn is the symbol for day. Day is coming. But in the symbol dawn, just as the dawn, the goddess of dawn is coming down to earth, before she comes on earth, she turns around to look back at the sun which we don't see. The supramental sun, which is the everlasting spiritual truth and the supramental day, is what she has come for. So for him, this is the gleam, the dawn. For him, Aswapati, he has the first dawn of the spiritual day. And the rest of the canto and what goes beyond it is going to describe what that spiritual day is for the individual when it's liberated from apprenticeship to the ignorance. So what we saw in Canto 1 for the earth has come for him. Because the Vedic rishis understood, they discovered the dawn as individuals. They saw the dawn for them. It wasn't the dawn for all humanity or the earth. They didn't come to transform the world. But they understood the dawn is telling them about some great truth beyond for them. He's having the Vedic realization now. The goddess of dawn is coming to him in his personal experience. He grew in spiritual stature into his larger self. A greater being saw a greater world. And he describes the characteristics, a fearless will for knowledge. He's no longer limited by the safety of reason. We always say, be reasonable, which means remain ignorant. Don't go beyond, because reason is our boundary. It gives us a sense of security. As long as we act within the bounds of reason, we feel safe. But as long as we're acting within the bounds of reason, we are missing the whole truth and the whole adventure. So his fearless will abandons the limitations of be reasonable. And he goes for the ultimate experience. He says, powers that sleep unused in man, they become awakened in him. And he made of miracle a normal act. So in his own acts, they became miracles. We know if we consecrate one act or see one small thing as a miracle, we feel a fulfillment for our life. And how many can we remember in our life? His normal act became a miracle. I said this morning that Appa called at 5 o'clock, and when I called him back, I found out he never dialed the phone, but it rang. And he was thinking of me and thinking of what I said. Imagine if every moment of our day is like that. then life is really a spiritual adventure. This is what he's describing for Aswapati. He's not written a novel where he's telling us about marriage and going to dances and everything where, see, when Darcy arrives at Pemberley and sees Lizzie standing there on the lawn, it really is a miracle for him, which he will never forget the rest of his life. He can never forget it. Imagine if the whole story is one miracle after another. Of course, we will say it's not real because we don't know that. Our life, it doesn't become miracle, doesn't become normal. It's abnormal. It's extraordinary. It's once in a lifetime. If we can collect the list of all our miracles, it'll be a short list normally. But for him, his normal act became a miracle. And so all of life became a spiritual adventure. Can we imagine our life becoming a spiritual adventure at every minute? In every act? That's what happens to him, and that's what they want for us. That's what they're offering us. And that's what Appa's been talking about constantly. That's Mother's sunlit path. And that's what Appa means by a life of consecration to Mother, where everything becomes, the normal becomes a miracle. And now, he tells us about Aswapati's acquiring spiritual powers of knowledge. And the first of those powers is what he calls a pure perception. And what does he tell us about this perception? It provides an intimate vision that waited not to think. The knowledge he gets doesn't depend on his thinking. It's a direct, instantaneous knowledge without thought. He sees something and he has knowledge. So this is not the power of mind. Mind, when something happens, it thinks about it, categorizes it, tries to make to some conclusion about it. His spiritual perception is he sees something and it reveals the truth of it. What does he see? He says it can envelop all nature in a single glance. It can look at a situation in life and see the truth of it in the first instant without thinking about it or analysis. When Elizabeth sees Wickham, she sees his handsome form. She doesn't see what he is at all. Maybe even by the end of the story, she's still thinking about him, but she doesn't see the character of the rogue and scoundrel that he really is. Imagine at the first sight of him, she knows his true character. That's a pure perception. When when Bingley tries to introduce Darcy to Lizzie, he says she's tolerable. That's not perception. That's a vital arrogance on his part. He's completely blind. Imagine if on first sight of Elizabeth, oh, she's the soul I was waiting for. That's what he describes in the book of love in Savitri, in book 5. When Savitri sees, when she goes around India looking for a mate, when she sees Satyavan coming out of the forest, just appearing on the forest, instantly she recognizes, this is the soul, this is the one I've been looking for, this is the man I've been born for. That's the pure perception. It's not what comes by mind. Oh, he's the right height. He's the right, nice look and color. He probably has a good family. Maybe he's got a good job and good money. Education may be there. He's the right caste. All of that, nothing. Direct perception. This is what my soul was looking for. That's the pure perception. Mother, there's a story in Agenda. I won't tell the whole story. It's too long, but Mother is somebody refers to a man who's come to the ashram and saw Mother in the darshan. And he came to see Mother in her room. And later there's a reference to that man, and she says, who is that man? Oh, she says, the man with the beard. And they said, no, mother, the man doesn't have a beard. No, I saw him with the beard. Because she saw his real character, his life, maybe even a previous life there. She perceived the nature of the man. And there was a man who came, I'm sure you know these stories, there was a man who came for darshan, and he was told that he came by accident to Pondicherry or something, and he happened to come at a day on darshan, and he came and stood in the darshan, and afterwards he wanted a photo of mother. And he went into the ashram, and they showed him all of mother's photos. No, not her, the one I saw on the balcony. And finally, they showed him a photo of her at a very young age. Yes, this is her. So he had a perception of mother as she is, not as her form looked. That's the pure perception. It's interesting. In Dr. Thorne, Frank loves Mary. Frank loved Mary. They grew up as childhood friends. In spite of the fact that he knows she has no money, he loves her. And in spite of the whole world trying to turn against and separate them, he insists that he wants only Mary. He's got plenty of opportunities. Even when he finds out that Mary is the illegitimate child of Dr. Thorne, that her mother was never married, he still loves her. What happens? It turns out that Mary becomes the heiress who saves the whole property and becomes fabulously wealthy. When everybody sees this poor girl who has no birth, no money, nothing, he sees something of such value in her that he won't take anybody else. He has a perception. He may not be able to explain it, but it doesn't come from his mind. He sees the value in the girl that nobody can see outwardly. His perception opens to him. He sees, there's a line here, deceive no more by form. He sees the soul. He's no longer like Lizzie, seeing only the form. He sees directly to the soul of things. So he not only sees it, but he feels it. He's no longer living separate from everything else. He lives in everything else. He feels in him the heartbeats of other men. He feels what other people feel. He's invaded by their happiness and their grief. He's open. He's open to the universe. Their love, their anger, their hopes enter into him like currents or pouring waves. I don't know if you remember, there's a story of Sri Aurobindo. A mother tells the story, I think. But he's sitting upstairs in his room, and he feels a current of anger coming up from the lower levels of the ashram building, and just entering into him. And a few minutes later, the cook, a lady cook, who was very angry about something, storms into the room. He felt the anger just coming up, just like this pouring waves or currents, because he's not living in his own limited consciousness. He's open to the universe. Not only that he feels what others feel, but what he thinks and feels, he sees reflected in others. So he says he heard his own thoughts echoed in others' minds. What he thinks is expressed by others. So he's not just open to receive, he's open to give and see his own thoughts and aspirations and feelings expressing in other people. He no longer lives as a separate person, all alone, cut off from everybody else. He lives in and through the world around him. His inner self grew near to other selves, yet it stood untouched, king of itself alone. He was part of other people. They were part of him, and yet his inner being is not touched, is not determined by others. He's not just one with others. His real self is untouched, remain, because he's consciously, spiritually aware. Then, very interesting, for us, mind and our vital are the enemy. Our mind constantly gets in the way, our thoughts get in the way, our desires, our fears, our ambitions, our pride, and all of these beautiful things are constantly getting in the way. He says his mind and life became servitors. Mother writes about it in this prayer for those who want to serve the divine. She prays that her mind and life and body become willing servitors for the divine. For us, they run the show, and the soul can simply wait quietly. That happens to him. He says they become happy partners in the soul's response. So they reflect the soul, they become servitors of the soul. So for him, the outer being and the inner being are not working at cross purposes. They become one. They become one in their aspiration for the divine. And that's what happens when the psychic comes out. The psychic transformation is the mind, life, and body come under the influence of the psychic and seek what the psychic seeks. So he's having the psychic, this is the psychic transformation. And now we're going on. You see, it's step by step. We're already enough, but he's just beginning his journey still. Now the inner worlds revealed to him. The inner worlds, a door parted, and releasing things that are unseen, unseized by the human senses, appear in the inner chambers, secret chambers, luminous countries of the unborn. And very interesting line, where all things dreamed by the mind are seen and true. I read just recently an agenda. Mother says anything that we can think or dream exists somewhere. It doesn't necessarily exist on Earth, but there are so many worlds of possibility. In some world it exists. So he sees, he opens to those luminous countries of the unborn, the subtle planes, which we're going to learn much more about in Book 2, and where all things dreamed, all things we can imagine or conceive of, they already exist. So his knowledge is expanding way beyond the human personality to something much greater. Not only does he see inner worlds, but he just comes in contact with immortal beings. He says he saw the perfect in their starry homes, and we're going to learn much more about this in Book 2. But the typal beings in all of the subtle worlds, from the lowest to the highest, they are each perfect in their own world, their own type. He became aware not only of the inner worlds, but he became aware of the beings of those worlds, where he could see. He became a witness to them. And then he owned the house of undivided time. It's a very interesting point. We live in divided time. For us, the only thing that really exists is the moment. The previous moment is gone irretrievably. We may remember it, but we don't live in it. We can't go back and live in it. The next moment or the future, we don't live in it. We can only imagine it before it happens. He owns the house of undivided time. The best analogy for us is, for somebody reading Pride and Prejudice for the first time, Or for Darcy, for the characters in Pride and Prejudice, if they're having the experience, if it's not a play or a story, if they're living it, they live in the moment, which is how we live. The moment before Darcy shows up at Pemberley, he doesn't know that she's there and she doesn't know that he's coming. But we who've read the story, we know the whole story. We may watch the movie or read the book or talk about Darcy coming to Pemberley and how shocked he was to see Lizzie and how frightened she was and she wanted to run away. But we know what happened before. We know what happens after. It's undivided. It's a continuous stream. What a difference in consciousness. No? I don't know what's going to happen the next minute or the next hour or tomorrow. It doesn't exist. Yesterday is a vague memory. But when we think of Pride and Prejudice, the whole thing is there before us. So the analogy I think of is if you're sitting by the bank of a river and you watch things go by, suddenly a boat comes by or a fish goes by or a bird flies by. At one moment, the bird is there. Before that, it wasn't there. The next minute, it's gone. But if you're sitting on top of a mountain, you see the bird or the boat coming long before the person sitting on the sees it. And even after it goes out of sight around the corner, you still see it because you're looking from below. So for you, the boat didn't suddenly come and go. The boat has gone all this way, and at a particular moment it's here, a particular moment it's there. You have the whole vision. So this is the vision that he had of life. Very difficult for us to understand because we're trying to understand with the mind, and undivided time cannot be known with the mind. Sri Aurobindo says, even to imagine it, you can't even imagine except by an analogy. He got out of the mind. He got out of the limitation of divided time. He saw the whole thing. He saw the whole sweep of history from the birth of life on earth to its final fulfillment. The whole thing is there in a vision. This is a great spiritual realization he got by going in from the surface and going beyond the mind. So he has gone to the inner planes, but he doesn't stop there. Not only the inner planes are revealed to him, but the higher planes above, the whole hierarchy of planes going all the way up to the overmind and the supermind are revealed to him. Higher planes, a consciousness of brighter fields and skies, subtler bodies, acts that are vibrant with superhuman light, joys, lovelier scenes than Earth's, and happier lives. So his being is expanding not just inwardly to all that's subtle, but all the planes that are above, up to the highest level. He says, to worlds of beauty and bliss. He becomes conscious of beauty and bliss. And then he says, he acquired a knowledge which became what it perceives. When we perceive something, we think about it, look at it, sense it, feel something about it. He becomes it. Whatever he sees, he becomes, and he knows it by that identity, by becoming it. He knows it not through the appearances like Lizzie thinking Wickham must be a good man, or Darcy thinking she's tolerable. He knows it by becoming it. He knows what it is. He identifies with it. There's no longer the separation between the subject and the object. And then he says, a voice came revealing hidden truths, revealing what the earth is aspiring for, and revealing what the heavens are promising, which have not yet come. What really we're here for, what really we want, what really the world wants, and what really Heaven is waiting, the divine is waiting to give, all is revealed to him. And then he says, the wide world, he heard a cry of the world's delight to be. The world's delight to be. We know about the world crying, all right, but not in delight. Complaining about this and that, this hurts, this is unsatisfactory, I want this, I don't like this, all of that. What is this world's delight to be? It's not on the surface. In the depths, he sees that the world has a delight to be, an ananda of living. He could hear the joyous cry of the world in the ananda, the delight of existence and evolution and manifestation. He was in tune with the spiritual harmony and truth of the world. And he says, the wide world rhythms, he could hear their chant. What are the wide world rhythms? The world is going through a process, an evolution. It's going through different, like the waves on an ocean. It's going somewhere. It's moving somewhere. He could hear the chanting rhythms of what the world is seeking and evolving. Nobody till now knows the world is evolving. We know technology is evolving. We know fashions are changing. We know governments are changing. But that the world is evolving, moving from the finite to the infinite. In all my meetings with academics, historians, sociologists, economists, political, nobody has said the world is evolving and realized that it's going somewhere. We don't know where we know it's changing. It's constantly changing, but that it has any direction or is going somewhere, the scientists are not able to find out any rhythm. They're not able to make rhyme or reason of it. Except, yes, we're getting more technologically sophisticated and we're getting more prosperity. Then, not just the world. Now look at what's happening. The truths of the subconscious are revealing to him. And the truths of the superconscious are revealing to him. So those ends of being are rolling back. And he's going to discover what are the superconscious truths that are yet to manifest. And what are the truths hidden in the subconscious that we have to reveal. And we're going to learn about it. He's going to learn about it rather later in this canto. So he's seeing not just the truths of the world, the plane of life where we live, but the truths of the superconscious planes and the subconscious planes, all as one. And he says, immortal truths reveal, and immortal beings are revealed to him. Immortal truths that are trying to manifest themselves. Immortal beings that are communicating wisdom to him without words. Wisdom that can't be spoken in words without the expression of words is coming to him. He sees the battle between forces of good and evil in the universe. The sons of darkness or the kings of light and the titans of darkness. He sees the whole universe as a struggle between the beings of light, the gods that are working towards the evolution and the beings that are holding it back. So his whole vision, he sees what the world really is. And his life becomes an adventure of spiritual romance. Appa frequently talks about spiritual romance. It's not the romance we think of that's really, the real romance is the spiritual romance. Every moment becomes, each day, he says, was a spiritual romance. An adventure leaped an unexpected friend. Danger comes with joy. Each happening was a deep experience. Imagine that every day is like that. That every moment is fresh, surprising. Every event reveals something new. Every contact with a person who we thought we knew so well, and we discover something new in them. Every moment is a surprise because everything is the infinite trying to manifest. Imagine if our life becomes so fresh. He says high encounters. He hears celestial speech, sweet temptations of beauty, sudden ecstasies coming from a world of bliss. I don't know what you imagine as spiritual realization, but I don't think anybody has ever described spiritual. We think spiritual really, he's sitting very quietly, peacefully, very happy. Everything's very happy. Every moment is a thrilling adventure. Why should the divine manifest the universe just to be calm and quiet? It doesn't need a world for that. The unmanifest is all quiet and calm. It manifests for the delight of being an adventure and constant surprise at every minute. That's what Appa wants us to discover. That's what comes when we really can make consecration the spirit of our life. You can see it's impossible to describe this in philosophy. You can say in philosophy, people are happy or calm or something. Only in poetry he can share the experience. This is Sri Aurobindo's experience. His life, it was a spiritual adventure. Every moment was a spiritual discovery. What's going on in the world? What's going on below? What's going on above? What's going on in the other worlds? And how they're all interacting together for a divine purpose.
Sir?
Yes, Janani.
There is a question from Ashokan, sir.
Yes.
I'll read it,
yes.
Sir.
Yes.
Is there a way to overcome the limitations of human language and get the full intensity of the experiences described in Savitri? I am saying this because Bhagavan has described language as something without depth or wings. Yet, he was forced to use this poor medium for describing wordless experiences.
A very good question, Ashok. Remember that the question is there a way to get spiritual experience and describe them without the use of language, which is very limited? Even Bhagavan was forced to use language. But let's be clear. Bhagavan was forced to use language only to communicate to us. He used language not because he needs language. He needs language because I'm speaking English to you because it's the only language I know. If you speak Tamil to me, it's not going to communicate anything. You may be able to express so much. Bhagavan doesn't need language. We need language. We're limited by language. When our consciousness, and the real answer to Ashok's question is coming in this canto, because he overcomes the need for language to get knowledge, for communication. He has it's going to be described. I don't know that we'll get there because at this rate we won't reach the end of the canto. But he reaches the point where he can get knowledge and he can communicate without language. He meaning Aswapati. Sri Aurobindo and Mother did that all the time. Mother describes that if anyone had been watching the conversations between Mother and Sri Aurobindo, if they had been in the room where Mother and Sri Aurobindo were there, they won't be able to make any sense of it. Sri Aurobindo will say a word, and after some time, Mother will say something else, which in the normal sense appears to be totally unconnected. But they fully understand each other. In fact, they don't need the words at all. But the words are only an expression. The communication is not through words. So the first thing, if we want to get there, of course, this canto describes how do we reach that. The first thing is very clear. We have to give up relying on the mind's externalized way of seeing things. We have to stop thinking that only when we've understood it, when we've rationalized it, explained it, and spoken it, that it gets communicated. In fact, that's the first rule of psychic education. Give up faith in the mind's exteriorized way of seeing and knowing things. And you can say expressing things. The deepest feelings we have can't be expressed in words. And sometimes are only spoiled by when we try to put them in words. Even our deepest gratitude or our deepest love, it can never be expressed in words. American wives would like the husband to, you didn't tell me you love me today. You may have said it for 364 days this year and for 10 years before, but what about today? Love is not something that we communicate by telling I love you every time I see you every day. Love is something if it really exists, it exists at a deeper level. It need never be spoken. It can never be really spoken. And that's like gratitude. Real gratitude, It can only be felt. The word it only makes it, and on Valentine's Day, you didn't give me flowers, or you didn't give me a card, or you didn't give me chocolate, therefore you don't love me, means that's not the real reality. So, first of all, Sri Aurobindo doesn't need language. He has written Life Divine not because he has to explain to himself the philosophy of the universe. He doesn't need Savitri in order to explain to himself or inspire himself. He's trying to reach us. He reached us through philosophy. Now he's reaching us through over mental poetry. We need the words. If we can go beyond the words, and what we really should do, I'm giving explanations of some of the words, but what we really should do is we should become one with Savitri. We should live it. We should drink in the consciousness of Savitri, identify with it, make it part of our life, or go into it and become part of its life in consciousness, and then it will reveal itself without thought. We will get the inspiration that he's trying to communicate. The words are only a form and an occasion. If we meditate on it, if we commune with it, if we love it, if we're grateful for what he's given us, if we try to live it, if we try to discover each word or each thought, each image, and make it part of ourselves, it will grow in us. It will manifest its consciousness in us. So a very good question. So, adventure of spiritual romance. I don't think anywhere in the language of anything there has ever been a description of this. This is what life should be. This is the divine life that he's not reached divine life. He's only on the path now. And already it's become, from our standpoint, so divine. Now, he's moving on. He's not only opened his being, but he's rising to regions beyond the body and beyond the mind. He's going beyond the limitations of the physical, vital, and mental. He rises into regions of wonder and delight. A contact thrilled of mighty unknown things. Imagine if every day we thrill with unknown things. So we often have certain sensations about unknown things. I don't like that. I don't like this. But if we should thrill at every contact, it's a different thing. Ever his consciousness and vision grew. They grew loftier. They flew higher. He passed the borders of matter's rule and the zone of thought and life. So he's going up now. He's going to go up and then he's going to go down. He's going to go in both directions. He's not giving up this. He's just expanding up and not being limited by it. And when he goes up, he has the experience of the silent self. And this is the beginning. We see the psychic transformation because he's found the soul, and the soul is the body and life and mind are reflecting the spiritual soul. But now he rises above to the silent self, which is in the transcendent. He discovers the spirit that's not in the manifestation. So this is the spiritual experience, which for most yoga or for any yoga is the ultimate realization. He's going to have it. But for him, it's only a beginning, because the goal is not spiritual experience. The goal is spiritual transformation. For that, the spirit has to come down, and that's also going to happen. But now he's going up and discovering the spirit above. A contact into a silent self where world was not. Where does the silent self where world is not? There's no form. There's no movement. There's no manifestation. So this is Satchidananda. Or this is beyond manifestation. He's no longer in the universe. He's experiencing. This is the ultimate goal of the sannyasi. Oh, he went to moksha. He went to where there's no world at all, and the world doesn't exist anymore. For him, it's only a byway. It's a stop along the journey. All the forms and figures of the universe disappeared. Maybe it's a nirvana, a spiritual nirvana. He went into a signless region. Signless means there's no form, no image, nothing. But it's filled with content. It's not the content of words. It's not the content of images. But it's not empty. It's not a zero. It's filled with content, because Satchidananda, what we call a void, is not empty at all. It's the mother of everything. It's only not in the form where we can recognize it. That's all. He said where world was wrapped into a single being. The whole world was a single being, pure being. There's no self, there's no separation, there's no form, there are no objects, there are no people. There's only one single being. That's Sat. He realizes Sat. And all is known by identity. He knows it because he is it. He knows it because he's one with it. In the Upanishads, they say, that being known, all is known. So he goes to that being, which is the source of everything. And not only that, but very interesting, the Supreme looks out through him, through his eyes on the world. Meaning, what does it mean? It means he sees the world the way the Supreme sees it. How do I see the world? How do you see the world? We each see it differently according to our needs, preferences, ego. I'm here, you're there. I have this, you have that. How does the Supreme see the world? Can we imagine? We'd have to disappear. We have to look at the world from the viewpoint of the Supreme, and ourselves and our life and everything. So the ego is gone. The individual perspective is gone. And yet we know everything by identity. Everything there, because it's all a manifestation of us, of the being. The whole world is only the being. And saw all things and creatures as itself. He goes into this silent self, but he doesn't lose touch with the world. The creatures don't disappear. The objects don't disappear. Whereas in the traditional yoga, moksha means the whole world disappears. The world doesn't disappear for him. He goes into the pure being and looks out at the world from that pure being of oneness and sees everything is himself. Everything is Brahman. There's only Brahman. We see everything is other people and other things. I wish I had that. Everything is ours. Everything is us. Mother says that was a supramental vision. I think it's a good thing to say. I'm hesitant to make pronouncements because the hierarchy is so great, and to make the distinctions. But I would say, yes, when he sees the Krishna in everything, it's not Sri Aurobindo seeing Krishna in everything. It's the divine seeing Krishna in everything. As long as the individual is there, you can't see that. So I think that's a good way to try to understand what he's saying. Whether it's exactly the same, we'd have to think about it. But I think it's a good way to think about it. He saw all things and creatures as himself. He knew all thought and words as its own voice. Everything that was spoken, everything that was the supreme to him. The supreme is expressing through everybody. The supreme is acting through everyone. So that fits what you say. It is the God acting through everything and everyone that he sees because he's one with that reality. In Pride and Prejudice, we know that all that happens in the story is the expression of Jane Austen. Jane Austen is acting through everyone, through every event, through every character, through every experience and emotion. She's acting. That's how she sees it. It's all her. It's all a manifestation of her. She's not limited to Darcy or Elizabeth or this or that. It's all an expression of her. She sees herself in everything because everything is a manifestation of her. So imagine if we could see our lives that way. Imagine if we could see our lives and everything that happens to us in the way the author knows the story she has created. He says, in this consciousness, unity is too close to even search and clasp. Everything is so close, you can't search for it, you can't grab it. It's there, it's you. And love is a yearning of the one for the one. It's a very famous line in Savitri. Love is not what, for us, love is to get something that we don't have. Love is the yearning of the one for the one. And oneness is the soul of multitude. Oneness is not the absence of many. One is the unity in the many. The soul in everything that's different, there is the one. So oneness is to be in touch with that which is the same in all of us, or where we really are the same being.
Sir?
Yes, Shana.
There is another question, sir. This one from Divya.
Yeah.
Ashwapati saw the entire consciousness as one in a single vision. But when I come to face life, after seeing peaceful mother's picture, I see only my clamorous mind on seeing the world. I perceive peace and clamor as separate events. How to get Ashwapati's vision?
Fortunately, he has told us the answer to this. The first thing we must do is we have to come out of living in the ignorance. We are identified now with our thoughts, our feelings, our body, our ego, our separateness, our mind. So Mother says the first thing we have to do is go in. And he says it over and over in Life Divine, go in to reach the psychic, to reach the soul. Because when we reach the psychic, we can become one with, we are that one, the soul of multitude. When we reach our soul, we are in touch with the soul of everything around us. We're not relating to the world around us through our mind, through our thinking, through our preferences, through our attitudes, through our training, through our habits. We relate directly to everything else from the point of oneness. It's not the point of ego. It's not that which separates us from everything else, differentiates us from everything else. We are able, like Aswapati, to identify with it. So if you're asking how to have Aswapati's vision, I wish I could give you the simple answer how to get a nice cup of coffee. We have to outgrow the ignorance of twofold, the mind and the ego. And Mother's given us the formula and the path for that in psychic education, which essentially is to move from the surface, the vital, mental, vital, physical, move to the psychic. And the method that they've given for that is consecration. I don't have a shortcut. Is it a satisfactory answer, or did you have something else in mind? This is what we're talking about is if we want to have a momentary experience. So I would say what Aswapati has is a spiritual realization. When I first met up on the first 1 week or something, he said something I'd never heard before. He said, whatever Mother and Sri Aurobindo have realized can come to their devotees as experiences. There's a difference between experience and realization. No? We can go to a 5-star hotel and stay in it for a night. That's the experience. To own the 5-star hotel and have your whole life in a 5-star is the realization. That's an analogy. No? We can anything that they have realized, because they came here not for experience and not for personal realization. They came to give it to us. So their working for realization is available to us as experience. And ultimately, of course, we should acquire it as a realization. So what Aswapati has acquired as a realization must be available to us as an experience. Well, Appa gives a method for that. Take any situation, any act, anything in life, and consecrate it to its completion at the mental, vital, physical level, at the surface, at the depth. He's written about it in great detail. And you can have that experience in this unique issue with this person in this moment, where life just reveals the spirit, where the person no longer acts like a different person, where the situation gets completely transformed. That is what the only thing is for him, it's become a realization. It's become a way of life. It's become for us, we have to start by take something and fully give it to Mother, fully consecrate it to her, fully want what she wants, forget ourselves, and we can have that experience. In fact, he says in the next one, he came to a place where all truths unite in a single truth. I like this very much because in the work I'm doing, I'm dealing with people who all have different views and different opinions on everything. And they're constantly quarreling to prove who is right and who's wrong. And I realized when I read this, and there's another beautiful line in Savitri, that for Sri Aurobindo, the truth is not the truth that replaces other things. It's the truth that shows the truth in everything and puts them, Truths are not competing with each other. In our mind, what's right and what's wrong? I'm right and you're wrong, or this is right and that's wrong. In him, it's the truths that complete one another, that complement one another. So to have the real truth is to see the truth in everything as part of a single truth. To see the whole of which they're all, instead of saying we're right and they're wrong, find the truth in every perspective and the truth where they all meet. And this is the vision he has. This is what Aswapati reaches. He reaches that. He says, all truths unite in one truth. Can we imagine in a situation that there's one truth? And it's not ours, of course. Right now there's only one truth. I'm right and everybody else is wrong. One truth in which everybody's right, but everybody's limited. And then he says, where all ideas rejoin reality. It's a very interesting thought. Ideas rejoin reality. See, we know, in fact, I had somebody write to me 3 days ago about a paper that we're working on and said, after all, theory is different from reality. And you seem to be talking about a theory that is reality. That's not possible. It was very interesting. I didn't know how to answer him because the knowledge that Sri Aurobindo's given is not a theory different from reality. It's the theory that is the knowledge of reality. So Sri Aurobindo says all ideas in the mind are not real. They are images. They are reflections. They're like the photographic picture or the reflection in the mirror. They are never the reality. And in mind, all our thoughts are only images of the reality, representatives of the reality. If I talk about money, that talking about money or thinking about the word money is not money. If I talk about love, it's not love. But he says there's a point where ideas rejoin the reality. They are the reality. That's the real idea. Sri Aurobindo says the real idea is not a representation of reality. It's a vibration of reality. He says it's a vibration of being. Satchidananda manifesting the truths of being as real ideas creates the universe. So we have to go from the ideas that are images or photographic reflections to the thing that they represent. And he's coming to that. Aswapati is moving away from the images and appearances of mind to the truth behind that mind is trying to grasp. He calls it supernal wisdom, wordless wisdom. We think of wisdom. What's the wisdom? Please tell me what he said. It's wordless. The real wisdom is not in words. The words are only images or ideas that put us in touch with the wisdom. The real wisdom is beyond words. It's absolute. So he reaches that. He reaches that real wisdom beyond words, where what he knows is the reality, not an understanding or a description of the reality. He says, where knowledge needs not words to embody an idea. We don't know how to relate to an idea except through words and ideas. While there one can be wider than the world, while there one is one's own infinity. It defies words. All my words won't make it real. We have to be quiet now if we want to understand it. Yes. So you're trying to find an analogy in Pride and Prejudice. What would be the truth that combines all truths in a single truth? No, that's what you're trying to say. So can you see in a certain sense, partially, not completely, Darcy does it? Darcy has a viewpoint. On everything he has an opinion, and his opinions are opposite to everybody else. But how he acts when he goes to London, he acts in a way, first it solves a problem for him because he wants to marry Lizzie. So he can marry Lizzie, he has to solve a problem for Lizzie, which is Lydia's elopement and disgrace of the family. To solve the problem for Lizzie, he has to solve the problem for Lydia. Because without solving it for Lydia, he can't do it for Lizzie. To solve it for Lydia, most despicably, he has to solve the problem for Wickham. And for Jane, exactly. Now you've got the spirit of it. So in practice, Darcy didn't think, how am I going to solve my problem? He didn't act that way. And he finally came to the point not only of acting in a way that solved the problem for Lizzie and Wickham and Lydia and Jane and Bingley, but he also did it in a way without even wanting it to be known. And incidentally, he solved the problem for Mr. and Mrs. Gardner because Lizzie loves them, but Cheapside, they live in Cheapside, and that was enough for him to tell Bingley, you can never marry Jane. He has to bring Cheapside to Pemberley. And he solved a big problem for Mr. Bennet. He solved the problem for Mr. Bennet and for Mrs. Bennet, of the person he would least like to see. So of all the characters in the story, except for, even for Caroline, if she can't marry Darcy, what she really wants to be is Darcy's sister-in-law. She gets that. So the only one in the whole story who's not directly benefited, apparently, even for Collins, he's solved because he becomes a relative of Darcy. Lady Catherine seems to be left out. So he came very close to a truth that unites all. No? The truth that really unites all is not a truth of all the individuals. It's what Appa has been saying about this story. The greatness of this story is the social evolution of the country. The truth that's manifesting through everybody is that society is progressing, not just these 10 people. The whole society is progressing, and this is the truth that unites all and is moving towards the progress of the whole society. So it's a very, very good question you've asked, and it helps us understand. We have a problem, we think of solving it for ourselves. Oh, and you want me to solve it for a second person and a third person? It's already impossible. But the truth is, if Darcy has tried to solve this problem only for himself, he never could solve it. His problem is doing it for himself. When he really tries to go to the single truth that unites all truths, he solves it in a way that is magnificently, infinitely greater, and it's for everybody. That's what they're asking us to do. That's what Appa. So it makes it so real when you bring the story. It's no longer an abstraction. Great. Great.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, there is a question from Ashokan, sir.
Good.
The mother was divine by birth, yet she took a tremendous human effort to get results. Being divine, could not she have gotten results through token efforts only?
The mother didn't take efforts to become divine. She was divine. The mother was taking efforts to make the world divine. That is, to make the world manifest divinity. She knows the divine. She realized the divine. By the age of 25, she has realized the inner divine. And by the time later she describes in Ananda, she has realized the whole, she has become the universe and beyond the universe, and it's all divine to her. And she never loses touch with that. But she has taken a human birth in a body to make matter divine, to make life divine. And that can't be done for an individual. That has to be done for all. That has to be done on behalf of all. You can say that Mother and Sri Aurobindo's whole life is a token effort. The very fact that they came and worked and brought down the supramental force, living in a body, living in a life, working in what they did in their relations, was a token effort. They didn't go around to the whole world trying to transform everybody and everything. What they did from the highest spiritual plane as a token to bring down and speed up the evolution. And that's what he says is the role of the avatar, and they are more than avatars. So Mother didn't do this to become divine. She's already the divine. She has come to make the world manifest divinity. And we have from Sri Aurobindo, where somebody asked, is it true that Mother could have supramentalized the world in a day? And he says yes. So that's an answer to your question. It's not that the Divine Mother doesn't have the power to supramentalize the world in a day. It's because the divine intention requires a process and a working out for its adventure, for its delight of existence. And they came to speed up that process, but not to cancel it. We might as well ask, couldn't the divine have simply manifested the life divine? The divine didn't have to create ignorance, create unconsciousness, create falsehood, and then create life divine. He says, this is only one universe. This is not the only possibility. The divine was not limited to evolving. The divine chose this manifestation because it wanted the adventure of an evolutionary self-discovery and delight of being. Delight, not just the bliss of being or ananda, but the delight of being. So having created this as the divine intention of the universe, Mother and Sri Aurobindo have worked according to the rules of the game. Not to cancel the evolution and suddenly jump from, say, if you want to know the end of the story, you don't have to read the story. From the moment they meet at the first dance, you can go to the end and find out that they get married, no? How many would you recommend to do it? Oh, read the book. Read the first page and the last page. That's all you need. The real knowledge and joy and fulfillment is only when you read the story through and see how it's unfolding, no? So this is the story, this is the novel that the divine has created in this universe. And maybe it has many other stories that it's written, and maybe they're happening parallel in other universes, like the scientist says. We don't know. But this is the rules of this game, this story. A very good question now. Okay, I'm not even halfway through, so I'm not going to rush. I'll go a little further, and if there are any questions, we can take them. And clearly, we need, as much as I thought, one canto per session, even going quickly and not in detail. There's no way to rush this, so we won't rush it. But I'm also informing you that if you have questions, please feel free, because we're not going to try to, there's no way we can complete today anyway. Okay, so we're Aswapati I keep reminding you because it's really important to have this in perspective. We're still at the beginning of the story. He's still just beginning his adventure. The adventure is not over. He's still at the very beginning of the adventure. How many of us have ever conceived of spirituality and spiritual experience? This is a universe, an ocean, no? His center was no more in earthly mind. He's no longer living through the mind. At our best, we live in the mind. Many oftentimes we're in the vital or in the physical. But we can complement ourselves when we're in earthly mind. His is no longer in earthly mind. He has a power of seeing silence that filled his limbs. He didn't just rise above mind. Earlier he rose above mind. Now a power of seeing silence has come down into him. Descended, a higher power of knowing has descended and fills his being. He neared the still consciousness, sustaining all. Without losing touch with the universe around him, he reaches a point of consciousness, of absolute silence and stillness, where the whole world is sustained by it. A voice that only by speech can move the mind became a silent knowledge in the soul. So his knowledge no longer comes by speech. It comes directly as the silent knowledge in the soul. He knows it because he knows it by identity, not because it was explained to him or he saw it. Not only the knowledge, but strength. The strength of peace. The strength that only in action feels its truth now was lodged now in omnipotent peace. For us, we feel our strength when we act. I really told him where his place is. I asserted, insisted on my authority, and everybody is with. He got to the point where his strength needs to be expressed in action any more than his knowledge needs to be expressed in words. The foundations of his strength was an omnipotent peace. That's what Appa always says. If you read, I don't know if you know, there's a little booklet called Bases of Yoga. It's an extract from Sri Aurobindo's letters. One of the first things I read before reading the serious big books, little excerpts. And he constantly talks about calm and peace as the first step in yoga. The first step in yoga is not spiritual realization, calm and peace. If you can be calm and peaceful in any situation, you create the basis for yoga. That's the basis for yoga. That's the basis for real strength. Not that I can shout louder than the other person or exercise my authority or physically beat them or control them, but where I can be calm and peaceful under any circumstance, unshakable peace. That is the basis of peace. The basis of knowledge is not that to be very persuasive and win any argument and give a clever explanation for anything or be able to convince anybody of anything. The real basis of knowledge is not communicated through words. It's known. It's known in the depths of the soul. So silent knowledge and the strength of peace. Now, it's one thing to know that there's a truth that unites all truths. It's another thing to see the world is without conflict. For us, the whole world is in conflict. The political parties are quarreling. The companies are competing. The husband and wife are dominating each other. The students are competing for the best marks, and everything is and so forth. He reached a point where the the controversy, the conflict, the battle, the war of thoughts, the clash of forces, everything ceased in a truth which lives in its own light. Meaning, he saw behind all the conflict is on the surface. He saw behind that the truth that lives in its own light and is moving towards its own purpose. In Pride and Prejudice, that's the social evolution. We see Darcy and Wickham competing, Lady Carolyn and Elizabeth competing, Lady Catherine and so forth, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet competing, but behind it there's a depth where there's no competition, there's no conflict. There's the society evolving from lower consciousness to higher consciousness. He reached that still consciousness where there's no conflict. It doesn't exist. Not that everybody started behaving properly. Not that everybody stopped fighting. Behind the fighting, behind the quarreling, behind all of this, he saw there's a peace. There is a truth that's expressing itself. That's the vision of spiritual evolution. In Pride and Prejudice, we see social evolution. He sees the spiritual evolution which is progressing through everything. And the conflict is only on the surface. There's no real conflict for the divine. There's an unfolding of its purpose. The conflict is only like a waves on the surface of the ocean. So he lived in that. He not only saw it, he lived in it. For him, life ceased to be a life of conflict, tensions, stresses, competitions. He lived in a harmonious truth beyond all struggle, conflict, sorrow, and pain. How blissfully wonderful. Oh, there's such a place to live. Now the question should come, how should we live there? Right? So that's what Mother means by the sunlit path. Obviously, we can't live there in the mind or the vital or the physical. We can't live there on the surface. We can't live there in the ego. As long as we're in the ego, we're in the dualities. We can get to the psychic. We can live the walk on the sunlit path of harmonious truth. The universe as we know it has been created by division, by opposition, by competition, everything clashing with everything. Sri Aurobindo has given us the formula for the truth that reconciles all truths. The truth from which all truths emanate. If we get to that, we will have that vision that Aswapati did. And I'm really glad you mentioned about P&P because that's what Darcy did. At least he really got to that point, if not mentally, somewhere in him where he got to the truth that reconciles everything. That's what Aswapati's getting at the universal level, not just to get married to Lizzie. Now, he reaches the first, he's the first great spiritual realization. His soul stood free, a witness and a king. Sri Aurobindo says realization of the self, the freedom of the self in Life Divine and in Synthesis, he says, is the first real essential condition for spiritual progress. In all traditions, this is the ultimate realization. If you've got that, you've got everything. For him, it's the first. The soul's freedom is not the goal. If the soul needed to be free, it didn't need to take birth. It was free before it took birth. But the soul in the body being free is different from the soul in the psychic world being free. In the psychic world, it's in the bliss. It's one thing I can be very calm and quiet and peaceful when I'm alone in my own room. It's another thing when I'm walking in the bazaar or running a company or raising children or teaching a class or whatever it is. No? So the soul should be free, not in the Himalayas. The soul should be free in the middle of life. So he reached that. He was free in everything, everywhere, all the time, unconditionally free. And again, he comes back to time. I still don't understand this portion. I discussed it with Appa. He abode at rest in indivisible time. Understand it means I know the word. We've already talked about undivided time. I think it's the same here. So somehow the soul being free and resting in indivisible time are related to each other. You can't be free as long as you're in divided time. But exactly how they relate, I don't know. Maybe by the time we finish Savitri, it will be clear. But it's clear. He describes what he means by indivisible time here as if a story long written but acted now. That's like if we watched the movie of Pride and Prejudice. It was written 200 years ago, but it's acting now. It's indivisible time for us in the story. That means our life is like that. The world is like that. It's a story long written, but when we experience it, it's every moment we don't know what's going to happen. If we are in the indivisible time, we do know the moment, we watch the moment, but we're not limited by the moment. We can still experience the moment, but we're not caught in it, trapped in it, imprisoned in the moment the way we are in our mental consciousness. Anyway, it requires, in his present, he held his future and his past. Obviously, doesn't mean he just remembered the past and imagined the future. He held them. What's the difference? If I remember the past, I feel I have some, say if there was a wonderful experience in the past and I can remember it, I feel I can possess it in some way by the memory. But it's not really there. If I can still have the whole past experience, not just a memory of it, the wonderful joy of every wonderful experience, for example, and it's there at all moments, then I can say I possess the past. I don't just remember it. I can imagine the future, but if I have all the richness and wisdom and knowledge and joy and fulfillment that I'm going to get in future for infinite births, and it's all there now, it's at our possession. It's not just by an imagination. This is something I think if we really read the poem the way it's intended, we may not get it as an explanation. We'll get it as an experience. At least somebody will get it as an experience and they can try to share it. Of course, in words, this experience can come to us, not by trying to understand it, but by trying to identify with the story. I'm just going to do a few more slides so we reach the middle. The toiling thinker widened and grew still. So he stopped being the thinker, trying to understand. It's a constant theme. Wisdom transcendent touched his heart. Interestingly, it didn't just touch his mind. What happens is very interesting. When you stop thinking, it's not the knowledge comes in the mind. The knowledge comes to the heart. What's the difference? The heart is what we feel. The heart is much more real to us. The thought is separate. So when we stop thinking, not only the knowledge can come in the mind, but it can come in the heart where we can feel the truth of it and not just understand the truth of it. And the mind no longer screens us away from the infinity. the reality, the infinite reality begins to reveal because mind is not blocking and getting in the way. So he constantly comes, the same theme keeps coming back. The real knowledge comes when we stop thinking, when we withdraw from the limits of mind. It's beautifully, incidentally, in Sherlock Holmes, many times Watson asks him, so what do you think is the answer? Who did it? What's the explanation for the crime? He says, it's a cardinal error to try to come to think about something when you don't have the facts. So he refuses to think about the problem until he has the facts. Whereas the mind would like to immediately come to a conclusion. Immediately we come to a conclusion. She did it. She's always doing these things. I know she did it. Like that. So to be able to not seek the knowledge of the mind, but wait for the knowledge to come. Now he's going beyond to superconscient realms. His journey goes on. Across a void, he glimpsed. He glimpses. Across a void means he's going beyond mind. The mind is quieted. There's a void beyond mind. This is something that keeps coming back in everything he writes about spiritual experience. The first thing you do is not you go from where we are to something else. You go from where we are to a nothingness. You have to give up with being what you are before the higher experience comes. So it's like if a criminal who's been stealing his whole life, earning a living, and says, why don't you become an honest man? I'd be an honest man if I were rich. So if you give me money, then I'll stop stealing. What we would say to him, first you stop stealing, and then only the chance of becoming an honest man and earning the money honestly. So we have to stop being what we are. We have to stop being, mother says, if I'm fully selfless, everything will come to me. So how do I go from trying to grab everything from my egoistic selfishness? If I get everything, then I'll stop being selfish. No, she said, you have to give up being selfish, give up being egoistic, have nothing, ask for nothing, and then only it will come to you. You have to go through that silence in between. When Sri Aurobindo gave silence to Paul Richard, he said, please take it away. I feel I'm going crazy. I don't know anything. So this is a constant theme, like ascent and descent. We have to be able to move into the silence. So then he says, he reaches a point where there's only peace and silence and the absolute. And then he says, out of the stillness, mind is newborn. He doesn't give up his mind because the goal is not moksha. The goal is to bring knowledge into the mind, to transform the mind. So when we go to the spiritual truth in silence, and when we come back, the mind is newborn. Not the old ignorant mind, but a wider spiritualized mind. So this is the beginning of, he goes to the superconscient, and when he comes back, his mind is no longer the same. The superconscient has touched his mind and begins to transform it. He knew the source from which his spirit came. Now he knows the source. Up until now, he doesn't know the source. Now he discovers his source is in the superconscient. He plunged his roots into the infinite. My roots are in my body, in the vital, in the ego, in the mind. I'm here, sitting in the chair. His roots are in the infinite. Mother said even when she's acting, talking, feeling in the body, her roots are in the infinite divine consciousness above. She's up there, not here. She's acting down here, but her roots, her base, he based his life upon eternity. I base my life on minute to minute. What's next? Oh, it's time for lunch now, right? That's it. He based his life on eternity. I'm constantly thinking, I'm leaving on a flight at 4 a.m. Have I packed my bags? Do I have my ticket? Did I forget anything in the morning? How do we base your life on eternity? That means you can never be in a hurry. You can never be under stress, anything like that, no?
Sir?
Yes.
There is one more question from Ashokan, sir.
Welcome.
According to my understanding, every era of progress is followed by a conservative upsurge. What conservative upsurge are we witnessing post Bhagavan and Mother's era?
So what conservative upsurge are we expressing in the following Mother and Sri Aurobindo's descent and manifestation? Is that the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then let's first examine the assumption that every progress is followed by a conservative upsurge. That's the first statement. Is it true? What brings a conservative upsurge? Is not the progress, it's the ego. It's the ego that wants to possess the progress, which I would say is to cancel the progress. It's true, I understand the statement in this sense. Whenever we achieve something more, we tend to be satisfied, and when we're satisfied, we want to hold on to what we've gotten. If I get a promotion, by making a real progress, I get a promotion, I get a higher status, or I get a higher income. My first concern is I want to maintain it. So instead of aspiring for more, I want to maintain and ensure that I can hold on to what I have attained. Does that fit the description of the first sentence? I'm asking just for a clearance. Did my description of the conservative upsurge fit the description that you were talking about? So I can go on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then let's look at that conservative upsurge. The progress comes when we move away from ego and we move towards Mother. It's not the soul that becomes conservative. It's the ego that wants to possess what we have achieved by moving beyond the ego. By moving away from the ego, we make a progress. After we get something more, the ego wants to come back and claim it. And it is true that that's what the ego does. It's not true that we inevitably give into it. After making an effort, a sacrifice, consecrating, praying, aspiring, we get a boon, and the ego, which we got because the ego moved out of the way, and then we want to claim it and possess it for the ego. And the ego will always do that until it's dissolved. What Sri Aurobindo, the way Sri Aurobindo would say that is, each time we go up, the lower consciousness in us rises to try to swallow it. When the supramental came down in 1956, Mother says the dark forces from the Earth's consciousness rose up and swallowed it. That can be a description of what you were talking about. It's that process has to continue until the light goes all the way down into the inconscient. So the answer is, to the first part is, we should not be aspiring for the satisfaction of our ego. Because then we constantly fight with this. Appa writes very often, when we consecrate or pray and solve a problem, we feel satisfied. The problem is solved. What he wants us to learn, to get from that, is not that the problem is solved. that we have a prayer, that consecration is powerful, that prayer is powerful. The ego claims the result. What we're supposed to learn from that is the power of prayer and consecration. The ego takes the result, which it didn't pray for, because the ego can't pray or consecrate. It can only move aside. So the lower tries to take and possess the boons that come to us from the higher. And we have to that's the whole yogic progress is. Each time there's a descent of grace from above, there'll be a lower level of consciousness that rises, and that's what we have to progress. To progress further, we have to deal with that. If we put ourselves on the side, if we side with the ego, we want to possess it and claim it for ourselves. If we put ourselves on the side of the spirit, something more for me to transform, more impurities I have to transform. So that's what the process is true. It is the response of the lower consciousness to the higher, and we constantly have to counter it and keep aspiring to go higher. The extraordinary thing about Aswapati, and we're about halfway through his first experiences. We're still in phase 1. He's still in primary school. He's going all the way for PhD and beyond. He's still in primary school, but he never satisfied. He never celebrates. He never goes and tells his wife, you see, I had a great experience today, or I had a great knowledge today. Listen to me and listen and do what I say. He never levels off, because his goal is not to meditate and get a knowledge that will make his wife respect him. His goal is to do what the divine wants. So the solution is to have the right aspiration. The right aspiration is, I'm praying to Mother to satisfy my ego, means my ego will always come back and use every prayer to assert itself. I'm praying to Mother to be what she wants me to be her child, so that she can do what she wants. If I have the right aspiration, then I don't have the same problem. So I think I've dealt with the first part of the question, which is this relationship between, we used to discuss it often on the calls. Every time we accomplish something, we feel satisfied, and satisfaction cancels progress. That's the dilemma. The ego feels satisfied, not the soul. The soul wants the divine. We think of the soul and the divine only when the ego is not getting what it wants. So our very reason for thinking of the divine is the wrong reason. It's better than nothing, but it's fundamentally flawed. The motive for calling and praying to Mother is to satisfy the ego. Where the whole the divine did not come, Mother didn't come to fulfill our egos. Mother came to make us divine and to discover our divinity. The right thing is that we should be praying, we should be consecrating, not to satisfy the ego, to become what Mother wants us to become. So every time we achieve, we grow the banana, we pick the banana, we peel it, we throw away the fruit, and we take the skin. That's what Appa's constant theme. I grew so many bananas, but I'm still not satisfied my hunger. Because no matter how much banana peel you eat, it's not going to give you nutrition. We throw away the fruit and we keep the peel. And that's Appa's constant message. If you read back all he writes, he constantly says that. It's very funny, but it's very true. Now there was a second part to the question, and that is, Mother and Sri Aurobindo have come, and they have really brought down heaven on earth and given us a knowledge and given us an opportunity, given us a power, given a grace that's never been there before, by any comparison before. And what's the result? Does this awaken a higher aspiration in us to come closer to them and to serve them and to identify with their aspiration and to feel filled with gratitude to them? Or does the ego claim that I'm a mother's devotee? So I got this thing and that thing, and my status has gone up and my wealth has gone up, and I'm a more important person, and now even my husband respects me. And what is it we're doing this for? In the measure, we do it for the ego. We cancel out the main reason that she's come. Read their books. Try to find one line in their books where they're promising everybody marriages and jobs and cars and houses and everything. Nothing wrong with cars and houses or cows or everything. Nothing wrong with all of that. But what's the purpose? The purpose that Appa is writing all of this. He wants everybody to have 100 crores or even 100,000 crores. Not because we need 100 crores to be spiritual or to be happy, but because he wants us to discover the truth of Mother, the power of Mother, the joy of growing into her light and consciousness and having it fill us. In the measure we do that, we grow like he grows, from peak to higher peak. Instead of crawling, we soar like the eagle. And that's why he's such an inspiring example, because he never does anything. He hasn't prayed for anything so far, no? He hasn't prayed for anything so far. And finally, we're going to find out in the third book, when he finally reaches Mother face to face and says, I'll give you anything. What do you want? I want you to come down and serve humanity and transform life on earth and liberate humanity from the ignorance. He doesn't think of himself at all. He thinks about what she wants. Essentially, he's saying, I know what you want. I aspire for what you want. I aspire you for the divine fulfillment. And therefore, he never levels off. He keeps going on and on and on. How much there is in the story and how inspiring it is. If there's any other, I'm going to stop here. If there's any other question, we can take it. Otherwise, we already went over the time. Okay, so we're just at about halfway through the canto, so we can fix the date, and I'm already prepared for the second part, so we can find the time. Okay, thank you.
Canto 3, Yoga of the King, பகுதி வரதான் முடிஞ்சிருக்கு. இனிமே இது அடுத்த மாசம் கண்டினியூ பண்ணிடுவார். ஹாஃப் தி வே தான் போயிருக்கோம். இதுவரை நல்ல நமக்கு நிறைய விஷயங்களை புரிஞ்சுக்கிறது ஈஸியா இருக்கிற மாதிரி, சாவித்திரி ஈஸியா நமக்கு புரிஞ்சுக்கிற மாதிரி தெரியாது. என்ன புரிஞ்சுட்டோம்ங்கிறது அவங்களோட எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ் தான். அனைத்து அன்பர்களுக்கும் நன்றி கூறி வணக்கம் கூறி விடைபெறுகிறோம். முதலாவதாக கேரி சார் அவர்களுக்கும் நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம். வணக்கம், நன்றி.